A warm welcome to you all, Jake Crulee podcast. Thank you all for tuning into another transmission. And yes, Jacqlin, I did see a video of yours, and it was with Miss Caralia. And I was actually having a conversation with a friend. We were talking about spirituality, consciousness, and everything else that pertains to spirituality. And he actually suggested that I watch the video and watch the conversation. So I did, and I took a lot away from it. And then from there, I looked at more of your work. I looked at your website. I looked on your Facebook page. I've seen the work that you're doing. And so naturally, I reached out because I want to know who you are. I want to know why you're doing the things you are doing. So yes, yeah, that's the backstory behind it. So for those who are listening to or watching this podcast, can you please introduce yourself?
So my name's Jacqlin, and yeah, I'm excited to have a chat. As I said to you a moment ago, I don't really know where this is going to go, and it's a really beautiful thing where I can just sort of show up and flow with whatever comes. I sort of have two titles that I share with people of what it is that I do. I am a parent empowerment mentor, and I'm also a creative development facilitator and speaker. So there's two sort of aspects to what I do, but the interesting part of it is that it's the same work. It covers exactly the same work. One just has a focus on parenting, a very strong focus on parenting, and the other one has less of a focus on parenting, but it is where we come from. We've all been parented, right? We all have this way of being in the world that comes from exactly the same place. So although one of these sort of streams of what I do in terms of the work that I bring in consciousness has a strong focus on parenting, it's the same work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will touch on those topics that you just spoke about. But I would like to bring it back to you, like specifically, and just hear about your childhood. Like, how would you describe your childhood growing up? And were you raised here in New Zealand?
I was, yeah. So born and bred, as they say, in Dunedin. I was born in Dunedin. And yeah, wow, childhood. I haven't been asked about my childhood for so long, but I share pretty freely about it. And I have just been writing about it because I'm about to release a book. So I've been finishing my first book, which is a parenting book. And it talks a lot about my childhood because one of the things that was obviously a huge, catalyst in my journey was the fact that I was adopted. So I was adopted at 6 weeks of age, around that time. And, that set off a particular set of circumstances. A particular set of beliefs were created from that. Which impacted every single aspect of my life and every single experience going on from that. So an interesting thing to happen obviously really early on. And then going on and having my own children, and one of the other pieces that is interesting about that is that my husband, the man who I chose to have children with, was also adopted, right? So that was an interesting thing that we found together, and then went on to have our own biological children. But I was raised in New Zealand, adopted, as I said, in a family who had 3 kids already, so 3 boys. As my mother said, she wasn't going to risk having another boy, so she adopted me. So she knew that she wasn't going to have any more boys in the family, and I was the only girl and the youngest. And as an adopted child, it was an interesting dynamic to come into.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear about how you were able to work through that. Like, did you have to face experiences where maybe let's call it baggage or just struggles or challenges, having gone through an experience like that? Did it play out in your life, in your maybe your first relationship? How did that express itself?
Yeah, it certainly did. I mean, it Interestingly, with the awareness that I have now, which I didn't have back then, I had no idea that, what was going on was big abandonment stuff, big not belonging stuff, which, I have language for it now, but as a baby, as a small child, even as a young adult, teenager, young adult, even as an adult not that long ago, I still didn't have the languaging or the awareness around it. And being able to look back at it now, I can see the patterns of experiences that happened, and the way that I compensated for those, for those experiences, which were interesting, coming from abandonment and having an adoptive mother and father, which went on to have another couple of stepfathers in the situation. My brother's leaving to go to boarding school. It was like I came out of my childhood, my younger years, with this massive belief that every man in my life is going to leave, right? Because that was the circumstances that had brought me to this point. So I would tend to leave before anybody else did. Right. So, so in all of my relationships, I was like, right, well, I would kind of, and I was torn, like really torn, like trying to make it work, because that was part of the conditioning that I'd received. Although wanting to leave, because then I would be beating the pattern, right? I'd be like, I'm going to leave you before you leave me. But the interesting thing is that I was such a horrendous person to be in relationship with and I can fully own that now.
Yeah, relatable.
But it was like I remember saying to my boy's dad, because we separated, I don't know how you stayed with me for so long. I really don't, because I was intolerable, right? And I didn't know how to be any other way. But what the behavior that I was presenting, right, the compensating tendencies, which is the language that I use, were playing out so that I could continue to reconfirm the belief, right? It's like if I treat you the way that I'm treating you, eventually you're going to abandon me, and then the belief gets reconfirmed, right? So I was really kind of shocked when that actually didn't happen in terms of the relationships that did stay. I was just not able to manage that, so I had to leave, right? I had to get out first. So just sort of looking at these patterns of behavior and where they came from and how I operated in that, because it wasn't necessarily logical, rational behavior that I was presenting, not at all. But that's where it was coming from, right? This absolute fear of being left, of being abandoned, of being alone. So yeah, massive stuff playing out, in all of my relationships. Yeah, for sure.
And you were going through these cycles of confirming your beliefs through the actions that you were taking and the decisions that you were making. When was the decision made, or was there some experience, some moment? Did someone pull you aside, or did you see a video that made something click? A light bulb went off, and you maybe said, "Hey, like maybe I should look into this, or try and understand myself, or why is this happening to me?" What happened for you specifically?
Yeah. I when you say that, it would be nice if it was just a video or a light bulb went off, but it certainly wasn't as simple or as quick as that. It was when I had children. That's when it was. It was like I was in a space of complete denial and complete shutdown of disconnection is probably the most pertinent word that I could choose. I when I talk about this time in my life, the way that I share it is that I used to be like a head walking around on legs, right? It was like I wasn't even connected to
Right.
this part of my body, because I was so disconnected to it. I was just so in my thoughts, and overrun by my feelings. And I didn't have any other awareness. And when I had children, it's like, it's one of the, it's such a massive event in someone's life. And for me, coming from the history that I've come from of abandonment, you know, of being alone, of you know, not belonging, a lot of worth stuff in there, of course, for me. But the fact that I went and had children on the other side of the world from where my family was, right? It was like these circumstances that were just so far away from, you know, being able to create a reality for myself, or an environment for myself where I was going to be able to bring up children in an empowered way. It just wasn't available to me, through lack of awareness, through lack of, you know, really understanding what the journey was going to be. So I went down a massive hole when I had kids. You know, when I had my first boy, I ended up with postnatal depression. I ended up with severe anxiety, which I'd never really experienced before, or never allowed myself to see that that's what I was experiencing, right? Because I'd been in some dark places. But you know, I had lots of coping mechanisms. You know, I had drugs, I had alcohol, I had, you know, work, and when I became a mother, none of those things were available to me anymore. You know, or I mean, they could have been, but I chose not to. And the way that my dysfunction, was playing out wouldn't have allowed me to go down that road anyway, because of the abandonment stuff. You know, my depression, and the way that my depression showed up was, I can't leave my child. You know, there's no way that I could go and hit the bottle and try and, you know, dive into an old addiction to cope with what was happening. I had to be there for my child, right? I had to be there 100% for my child. So I ended up in a hospital. I ended up in a mother and baby unit, which is, you know, a nice way of saying mental institution for mothers, because that's what it was, right? That is exactly what it was. And I had no idea that these places even existed. And I'm really, really grateful that they do, because I spent 3 months there with my big boy, my first boy. And, you know, the amount of money that was worth, that stay, is, you know, don't even want to think about it for back then, but 3 months without, you know, in a care institution, because I had come to a place in myself where I couldn't function anymore.
Wow. Yeah. Such a unique space to be in. Like we said in the podcast, it's kind of like a polar opposite. What did you learn having gone through that experience of being in that care with your son? Like, what were your biggest takeaways?
Yeah. Wow. What I learned was that for years and years and years and years, I'd been pushing everything down and squashing it and suppressing it and putting a lid on it. And I thought I was doing quite a good job until I had kids, right? Until I gave birth. And, you know, even the process of birth, just, it brings that stuff up, right? And I had to look at it. And because years and years and years of it was coming up that I hadn't looked at, and when I talk to people about, you know, trapped emotion in the body, even if you're in your 20s, you've still got a good decade plus of trapped stuff, right? Because, and this is, you know, touching on the parenting thing, we are conditioned from the moment that we're born that our feelings are not okay, right? That it's not okay to cry and get angry and, you know, express yourself authentically. You know, I kind of bring a bit of lightness in it. So it's okay to be happy, but not too happy, right? You can't be too happy. You can't be too big. And you can't be too joyful as a kid, right? There's a lid. And we learn that as children pretty quickly, that, you know, that emotions are not okay, or certain ones are okay. The ones that are positive are okay, you know, but again, not too much. But the ones that are negative, right, we got to squash that down, and we got to put a lid on it. And when I had my big boy, all of that came up, right? And it came up like a freaking volcano, right? Like it's seriously like a volcano, and which is the reason why I just went into freak out mode, right? So that was one of the biggest things that I learned. The other thing, I guess, that I learned was that, you know, I got every therapy that was available at that time, because I was like, I want to get better. I want to get better for my child. I didn't have enough worth at the time to get better for myself. It was all for, for my baby. And I took it all, right? I did art therapy. I did cognitive behavioral therapy. I did group therapy. I did all of these therapies. And yes, it got me to a place where I could function, right? It got me to a place where I could actually go out the door and make a decision whether to go right or left, right? Because I had so much anxiety in me before that I couldn't even make that decision, which is wild, having never had anxiety like that before, right? And now in the care, with the care of a newborn as well. And nobody tells you this stuff, right? It's like I was working in an architect's office with, because I used to be a corporate architect before I started doing what I do now. And I had a team working under me, right? Which I was managing, but give me a newborn baby and I'm in freak out mode, right? Because I just have no idea what to do with this screaming pile of poo, no idea. And that's the stuff that's not given for support of new parents, right? The way that we are going to change emotionally, right? The stuff that's going to come up when our I call it autopilot parenting, when that switch is flicked, and then you start, the patterns of the past of the way that you were parented start to kick in. Yeah. And I was shocked because me and my husband had this idea of how we wanted to be parents, and all of that went out the bloody window, and we started parenting in the way that we were modeled when we were kids. So, that stuff I had no awareness that it was even going to happen. But when people ask me what my biggest takeaway or the biggest thing that kind of shifted when I was in that hospital, it was actually when I got on the treadmill. And that was a really interesting thing, because all of the therapy work that I'd done was all talking, right? It was all talking. Even the cognitive behavioral therapy that I was doing, it was still talking myself out of the thoughts that I was having, right? But it wasn't going to the core of why I was having them in the first place, right? It wasn't taking me to a place where I could actually address the thoughts that I was having and the feelings that I was having. It was just giving me tools to be able to sort of reconcile them or manage them so that I could function out in the world. And that was quite a big thing to see, with my handy hindsight goggles on, because at the time I didn't realize that, but I was being interviewed for a magazine article, and that was the piece that I gave them. It was like, as soon as I got on that treadmill and realized that, oh my God, this thing, not just this thing, is important. And I did a lot of work after that to do with the body, right? To do with what was trapped in the body, so that I could move that, and release that out of the body. And what that gave me was that when I did start having different information, different concept, different understandings, different awarenesses come in, it actually took root. Right. I was actually able to apply it in my life, not just talk about it, or, oh yeah, I learned this cool thing, but then by next week I'm doing the exact opposite again. Right. To be able to actually bring this new awareness into my life, new levels of consciousness, because before it just wouldn't go in. Right. It wouldn't become integrated. I wasn't embodying the stuff that I was learning. So yeah, the treadmill. Who would have thought, right?
You can do you call that the treadmill story?
That's probably the new name of it. It's the treadmill story. Yeah, but it's it's really bringing a very new power into the work that I do. Like I did a lot of work in embodiment, and the last few years I've been doing a lot of work in consciousness, and now I'm bringing those two together, because you can't have one without the other. Right? You can't have a whole lot of consciousness, but then not embody it. And you can't be embodied and without having, different awareness, new consciousness. So yeah, it's been really cool. And the treadmill story was where it all began.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy for you, and much love to you. Like it's always inspiring to me to hear about people who have, taken the lessons they've learned and actually implemented them in their lives. So congratulations to you. And why do you think some people, and obviously this could be like a generic question, like a generic statement here, but what do you think allows people to change and some people will never change? What do you think is the difference between the two?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the thing that's coming to me, I remember writing a piece in my book, and it was something around along the lines of, I saw this post and it said, we're always kind of focused on the wounds or the challenges or the struggles that came from our ancestors, right? Or the lines of people that came before us, our parents and beyond. Yet we don't focus on the strengths that they gave us, right? And I know that for me, my mother gave me a lot of strength, although in so many ways she was very limited and being born in the war, very much in a survival mentality. And in respect to this question that you've just asked, it's like, there are definitely people who are going to keep going, right? Just this drive that they have within them. And I've definitely got a number of those people in my world who are just right, they just keep going, right? With whatever's coming up, they'll just keep moving and keep learning, and they'll keep the tension alive in their world without having to stay comfortable. Yeah, and there's always going to be people who just want to stay comfortable, right? It's and another piece of conditioning here that, we're conditioned to stay comfortable, to stay safe, right? And that's what the ego wants for us most of all, is to stay in that place of comfort, where that is the illusion of safety, right? This is what we know. This is I know how it is here. If we step outside that circle, then that's fucking terrifying. I can't do that. It's dangerous, right? Red alert, danger, danger. And the people who feel that pull or that call in their heart for more, right? Or that there's something else here. There's another way of being. And I remember when somebody asked me a little while ago, who are the people that you want to work with? Who are the people that you have the most joy of working with? And it's like, it's those people who have just discovered, right, that there's another way. There's another way to be, and that light has just gone on in their eyes, and they can feel it. Yeah, they can feel it. And then it takes that type of person who is ready to be uncomfortable, right? To actually ready to put themselves into that place. And it's not for everyone. Yeah, it's really not for everyone. And I remember somebody writing just a couple of days ago, they said entrepreneurship is not for everyone, to actually put yourself into that place where it's uncomfortable. And one of the things that I love talking about is that desire, or maybe not desire, there's perhaps not the right word, but being okay, getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, right? Or getting comfy in the uncomfy. It's like, how okay can you be when things aren't going smooth? How okay can you be when the shit's hitting the fan, essentially, when things are rocky? So in response to that question, it's like, it's not for everyone to go down these paths of opening, awakening, going and lifting into different levels of consciousness. And for me, I know that my mother paved that way. She gave me a lot of strength. It looked different, our strength definitely looks different, but I thank her for that, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And this is the other piece that I'll drop in around being able to change my relationship whenever I've been able to change my relationship to what's happened to me, then I'm in my power, and there's no question why I support parents, right? Why I empower parents, because I had a really shitty journey into becoming a parent. And I could let that play out in my life over and over and over again and never get over it. And there are certain types of people who just won't take that for an answer, right? They're able to find the gold in that, right? Find the gold in that, because there is gold. It's alchemy, right? It's being able to transform what's happened to you, change your relationship to it, but transform it into gold. And it's very different from the way that we understand, in terms of, I go and learn about it in a textbook and then I can teach it. It's like, no, you go through that stuff, you've got more goods than anyone that could ever have learned that in a textbook, So yeah, that's what came to me in response to that question, and it's a really interesting one, because this type of work isn't for everyone. A lot of people just want to stay safe. They want to stay comfortable, in that zone, and I know that I wasn't one of them. I definitely wasn't one of them. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I do, like see people who they like, because you can go through experiences, like traumatic experiences, either done to you or you doing them to others, or both. And I guess the way that it affects you just expresses itself in the way that you treat yourself and others. But to see people transmutate, as you said, like alchemize that, and like alchemize the energy and that suffering into love, into compassion, into like a willingness to explore and to learn and to grow and to connect, like that is a beautiful thing, right? And that should be celebrated like always. I feel like that should be one of the leading conversational topics every day. We should like have these conversations. And I've actually had to, in my life, like do a lot of that alchemization and a lot of that reflection. And you can really know a person when they can talk about their story like yourself and be so open with it. Like you're not hiding anything. You're not ashamed of it. It gets to a point, right, where it just simply is what it is. And now you can reflect on that, grab the insights, and then share that wisdom with us all. So people like you, we need in the world. And I'm curious to know, like, when did you decide to take this leap? Or when did you decide to take your teachings and the insight and then share that wisdom with everyone else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that when I came out of that hospital, with my boys, or my boy, and then I did go on to have another boy. So I've got two boys. And I did go back to practicing architecture. Even though I was a parent, I went back and I started practicing it again part-time. And I just got to the point where it was like, what am I doing? What's the point of this? I was making rich people richer. It was a very male-dominated, environment. And now I was a mother. I had different things going on in my world. And having come from a very masculine place in myself, I mean, you and I had a quick chat about lipstick before we jumped on to record. And,
right.
I had very, very short hair, and, I was rocking that very masculine way of being in the world. And then all of a sudden I was breastfeeding and, and had carried two babies. And what also really struck me, because as you were just talking and I was just reflecting on that last question, I began to question things. Like when that happened to me, I was like, why did that happen to me? Why? I want to know why. I want to know why every single thing that I didn't want to happen when I became a parent happened. You know, I didn't want to do my career anymore, which I'd spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours on, right? And then all of a sudden, I don't want to do that anymore. Okay, why? You know, my marriage broke up. You know, the way that I was parenting was not the way that I wanted to parent, and I didn't know why, right? I didn't know why, and I wanted to know why. And I think that, you know, anyone that raises their children to invite those questions and to encourage those questions is a really important part of the question that you just asked me before. But I started asking questions, and that's what happened. And what I also decided, you know, and this was a really conscious choice, was that I didn't want to be in the reactive end of working with people. You know, I didn't want to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, you know, cleaning up messes and putting Band-Aids on, right? I didn't want to do that. And I thought, well, okay, how can I be in a more proactive space where I'm actually preempting a lot of this stuff? And for me, in the way that I work, you know, so much of this is, man, if we can get to the parents, if we can work with the parents and empower the parents, you know, they're the ones that are parenting the next generation, right? It's a no-brainer. However, when we live in a society of ambulances at the bottom of the fucking cliff, then that's where we are, right? We're focused on putting Band-Aids on. We're focused on the symptoms rather than looking at the core, right? The root problems of stuff that's going on. So I ended up training as a hypnobirthing practitioner, right, which is birth education to support women to birth in a different way, right, which is way more the way that we're designed to do. And it's very proactive, right? And that led me into parenting. And the parenting led me into this body of work, which is focused in a completely different direction, which when you look at where I've come from, it's all been leading towards that, right? It's like, okay, I didn't want to go into the reaction. I didn't want to come from reaction or be in a reactionary way of working with people. I wanted to be in the proactive end. I didn't want to be fixing problems, right? And the work that I now do, it doesn't fix problems. It doesn't, it looks at it acknowledges what's going on, right? And we were talking about this before we jumped on record and started recording. It's like, you know, and we were talking about makeup, you know, knowing where you're coming from, knowing what's going on, right? What's there for you, what's coming up for you, what the current reality is, what, you know, but not putting your focus there, right? Because if I focused on all of the shitty bits of my life and everything that was going wrong and everything that I needed to fix and, you know, all of the shit that I'd been through and, you know, all of the fathers that left and the, you know, if that was where my focus was, then I'd simply be creating more of it. Right. And that is backed up by science, which is great. It's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, which focuses on what we've previously made important, right? What we've previously been focusing on before. And then we just see more of it, right? Which is a bit crap if you're just focusing on all your kids' shitty behavior and your partner's rubbish behavior and what they're not doing and what needs changing. The work that I've now been doing focuses on in a completely different direction, right? What you want to create, right? What you love about what's happening, what you most love in the world. And that's what led me to the work that I've been, that I've been teaching over the last number of years. And the beautiful part about this, Jake, when you focus on that, the problems take care of themselves, right? They naturally sort themselves out. And it's not through focusing on them. Yeah. Which is a really, really beautiful way to work. And it's so at odds with all of the other work that I'd done before, right? All of the personal development work, which goes on the premise that we need fixing, right? That we need, that we're broken and that we need, we need to work on ourselves and we need to fix ourselves. And, so it's an incredible way of working, which, you know, in the work that I do, we call it creative development. Yeah, it's about creativity. It's about creation rather than fixing. And I mean, you can even feel the energy in that, right? What am I creating, or what am I fixing? It's a completely different way of looking at the world, a completely different way of being in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you articulated that. And being in social services, that is something that I've actually had to accept and like reflect on, is the fact that we are essentially putting band-aids on wounds, right? Like we're not actually we're sort of like helping the person. We're almost feeding the person, but we're not showing the person how to cook, like how to gather the food and to prepare it. So that, I think that is why I have begun this podcast. And I don't know where this podcast is going. I don't know where anything is going, but all I know is I'm going to show up here and do my best and continue to just learn and grow. So yeah, thank you for bringing that to light, because I think that is important. And I would have these conversations with my colleagues, right? But it's interesting, like just being in a space with other people who I guess maybe aren't on the same wavelength as well, you know. So I'm almost in a situation where, you know, I need to find like-minded individuals who can resonate with me, because you either get it or you don't get it. And I do love how you spoke about the fixing, right? Like, because we don't need to be fixed. We don't need to be fixed. You know, we are intrinsically perfect. And I said to a friend, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I told him, you know, you can start to do self-help, but then there's a point where you transcend self-help, right? And then I think that's when you can almost experience the truth, if that's what the truth is. And in regards to these workshops that you do, can you just like give myself and those listening a brief introduction on what it is, what goes on, who attends, and all the good stuff?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it is good stuff.
Magic.
It's
I love
magic.
that. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that word, magic.
yep, it is magic. And you know, if you had have asked me 5 years ago that I would be calling the work that I do magic, I would have laughed at you, right? And thought,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is magic, because magic is possible when we're no longer bound by what we believe to be true, right? And so much of what we've been talking about, you know, when we're moving past the stuff that's happened to us and the way that we see ourselves, we are changing we're changing the relationship to that stuff. Yeah. And it brings us into a completely different way of being in the world, where none of that stuff means anything about us. Yeah. And I know for me in my journey, you know, I've had a lot of stuff in my past, you know, abuse, and, you know, there's been a lot of stuff that I've navigated through. And to get to a point where I don't make it mean anything about me, right? That's powerful. Yeah, really, really powerful, because we make it mean a whole lot of shit about us, right? A whole lot of stuff. You know, I fail at something, and that means that I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or, you know, whatever the piece is. And this work really, it shines a light on that stuff. Yeah, it shines a light on all of the beliefs that are playing out underneath, and the meanings that we're giving them, and what we're doing to compensate for all of that stuff. You know, the patterns of behavior that we play out in our lives. And, you know, because I know for me, it was so unconscious, all of this stuff, that I didn't even notice the patterns of behavior. You know, I didn't even notice that the 3 long-term relationships that I'd had were essentially with the same guy, right? A different version of the same guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But of course, it was all his fault, until I started going like that and go, oh my God, I'm actually the common denominator in all of these stories. You know, what am I going to look at to see how you know, how I could change things, how I could do things differently. So the workshops, you know, the trainings that I do, it teaches people how to see what's coming up for them, right? And to see what's getting in their way, and to see what's tripping them up in life, to see what's keeping them stuck. And it's powerful stuff when we can look at that stuff and see it there, because a lot, every single one of us on the planet has belief systems and understandings and thoughts about the way that things are. Things are a certain way, and then things just play out. And actually learning how to spot that stuff, and then be able to receive different information. A lot of the work that I do is around intuition. Being able to know that we actually know what's good for us. We know what's right for us. But another thing that we're conditioned out of, along with the emotion, that we were talking about earlier in our call, we're conditioned to look for the answers outside of ourselves. Somebody else knows what's right for me. Please, somebody tell me what to do. And I know that when I first had my baby, I knew how to run an architectural team of 10 people, but give me a baby. I had to try and write. I was reading books. Just tell me what to do, because it's not like we have not been having babies for thousands of years, and that, we have natural instincts and natural intuition. But I was so disconnected from that intuition that I didn't know. I didn't know that I knew what was best for me and my baby, and the choices that I was making. So being able to connect people back to what's true for them and what's right for them, and what's the best way for them to move forward in their own life is powerful. It's really powerful. And what that means is that it brings the reference point, so to speak. It brings the focus, or what I'm focused on, from out here, all my other partner's fault, all my relationships failing are all their fault, to in here. It's like I can actually, I have the power in my own life rather than everything else outside of me. So, huge pieces in terms of the awareness that we have, and where we receive information from in terms of our own intuition. We know what's right for us. We just need to be reconnected with that part of ourselves. So intuition is a big part. Perception, which is the first part, knowing what beliefs are actually running the show, getting to know our ego really well, that's what's playing out, the thoughts and the feelings that we're having, the patterns of behavior that we're just stuck in. Intuition, and then creation is the other part of what I'll share here. Being able to know what's got our focus, because so much of the time our focus is, as we've been talking about, on the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, right? It's on fixing things. It's on what we wish wasn't happening, and that's where all of our focus goes. Like just coming on for a live video, doing a live video, which I do a lot of now. But when I first started doing them, where was my focus? Was it on doing a great video, or was it on, oh my God, what are people going to think? They're going to judge me, and all of that stuff is the stuff that's coming up, right? The stuff that I wish wasn't coming up, and the stuff that I think that I need to fix or resolve. And that's what's getting all the power, right? So knowing where our focus is a huge part of the work that I do. Because I didn't realize that if I know where it is, consciously, because before I didn't know, I thought I was focused on what I love about life, or my hopes, or my dreams, but I wasn't. I was focused on all of the shit that I wanted to fix and wish wasn't there, and wanted, to change about everything and everyone and the world itself. And learning where that focus is, so that I could have the power to pick it up and put it somewhere else. And how life-changing that is, to understand about focus. Because one of the sort of one-liners in this work is, what you think you're focused on isn't actually what you're focused on. You're focused on all your doubt, you're focused on all the things you want to change, what you're not happy with. And that's just it's the conditioned way that we're raised, as humans. And for us out there who are rocking a very different way of being in the world, which comes through this way of knowing where our focus is and focusing it on creation rather than fixing, right? So that's kind of it in a few nutshells about what this work is about. It's the most empowering work I've ever come across. And I've done a whole bunch of personal development work, right? I've done a whole lot. And yet, even with all of that work, and I would call myself a recovering personal development junkie, because I would go to all the workshops and all the trainings, and I wanted all the knowledge and listen to all the podcasts, yet I still wasn't seeing things change in my life, right? There were little tiny steps and going towards things, but I was still riddled with doubt, and I was still, paralyzed, all the fears that were coming up. And this work has been the work that has completely shifted me, where that stuff no longer has the power in my world, right? It no longer has the power in my world. And the other thing that I'd love to share is that it's so much simpler than I ever thought possible, because before I was running under the assumption that I had to fix all that stuff, right? I have to get more confident, then I can do the live video. Then when Jake calls me up and says, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" Oh yeah, I'll do it when I feel confident. So ring me in 6 months or something. And I can't do the thing until I sort out all of that other stuff. The beautiful part about this work is that is not the premise, right? That is not the case. We have to know about that stuff. Yeah. We don't have to fix it. And that's the best news ever, right? Even the beliefs, even those core beliefs, like at my very core of not belonging and not feeling worthy and not feeling good enough, being powerless, not feeling safe, all of these things that are with us at our very core. I don't have to fix those. I don't have to change them. I don't have to delete them. I have to know that they're there. Yeah. Because as soon as I'm trying to fix them or change them or delete them or transcend them or get away from them, yeah, I'm giving them all the power. They've got all the power. They've got all of my focus. They've got all of my attention. And, I don't know if you know that quote where attention goes, energy flows, or yeah. And when I'm still giving all of that stuff my focus and my attention, it's just getting bigger. Yeah. And then my beliefs are screaming louder, and the doubt is screaming louder. You're not confident, you got to do that first, blah, blah, blah. And when I learned that, when that piece really dropped, it was like, man, this is like the simple way. Yeah. I don't have to fix that stuff anymore. I just need to be aware of it and take the power out of it and put it somewhere else. Yeah. And because I work with parents, I am a parent. It's like simple is way better, right? Less work. I'm all over it. I'm all over it. Right. So, deleting beliefs, eliminating beliefs, all of that side of it for me sounded like way too much work. And I'd spent so many years and so many thousands of dollars trying to, do that stuff with the other personal development work that I'd done, but I was still completely overwhelmed with my thoughts and my feelings. So this work has given me, a completely different way of being in the world. And it's the most empowering stuff that I've ever come across. So, and I want to share it with everyone, man, because, why wouldn't I, right?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? And it's great that you're doing it, honestly.
Yeah.
Like this is what we need. And what are your thoughts on, because this is something I kind of contemplate sometimes, is the fact that, I'm not doing it right now, but I am almost I'm not trying to do anything, I suppose. I just want to be me, but I hope through the discussions that I put out and as I continue to move forward and create different variations of content, that I can help empower people and allow them to take accountability for themselves and some ownership in their own life, and then, just help them navigate through their journey. What are your thoughts on like conditioning, society, and how the world is right now, the values, like the culture, versus the work that you are doing, right? Like trying to help people face their fears, their adversity, their trauma, transmutate, grow, learn, create. Because I almost feel like we're consumers more than creators, the majority of the population. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And I think you've given it away really in terms of what you've just said. It's that ownership piece, right? It's that taking responsibility. Because all of us have had stuff that's happened in our past, right? Every single person on the planet. And I think that, for some, they may think, well, I haven't been through that much, or, other people have been through way worse. And, that those sorts of things can play out. But every single person on the planet has got wounding, right? We've all been wounded. And we've all been wounded because we're all seeking, as small babies and children, we're all seeking nurturing, and we're all seeking validation from our, caregivers, our mother and our father. And we're seeking it measured from our own sense of self, right? And no parent is ever going to satisfy that, because every parent is different than every child, right? And it's kind of like, damn, we're never going to get it right. But what that lets us off is there's no perfect parenting, right? And when we can understand that, my mother's never going to love me the way that I want her to love me, right? Every time I see her, she's going to make a comment on my hair or my weight or something, or
Right.
my earrings, or she's not going to love me in the way that I want her to love me. But having the awareness that this work brings, I can see and receive her love, because it's her love. It might not be the way that I want her to love me, but it's her love. And that's been huge to allow, right? I could blame her for the rest of my life for the conditioning that came from her, because it comes from her, and her conditioning came from her parents, and all the way down the line. Or I can take responsibility, right? It's like, okay, here I am, she got me to this point. Yes, she raised me. Yes, I was conditioned into the adult that I now am. And what am I going to do now? Yeah, what am I going to do now? And it's not an easy move, because we are so conditioned to look outside of ourselves, right? From the moment we're born, we're looking for nurturing, we're looking for validation. And when it doesn't come to the way that we want it to, then we make it mean a whole lot of stuff about us, right? I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm all of it. And when we can take responsibility, when we can take ownership of where we are in our lives, right? And not blame the government or my ex-partner or my mother or, the guy over the road that's giving me a look, whatever it is, whatever it is. Because as soon as our eyes are on the other, right, or outside of ourselves, we're not in our power anymore. Yeah, we're not in our power. And it's a really simple one-liner. I saw it on someone's page and I was like, oh my God, that is gold, right? As soon as our eyes are on the other, we're not in our power. As soon as we're judging somebody else for what they're doing, as soon as our eyes are on anybody but ourselves, we're not in our power. And, with what's going on in the world, it's really easy to have our eyes outside, right? And have our awareness out, our focus, our energy is going outside. I'm reading all these things. I'm, there's a lot of fear that's been going around the world over the last couple of years, and it's a thing to not engage with that, and to really be solid, and take ownership for one's own self, right? And one's own journey. So, there is a lot going on in the world, and, I'm incredibly grateful that I've found this work, because otherwise I'd be spiraling down, some pretty dark holes. And I did a couple of times over the last couple of years, and, I've got some incredible people around me. And it was something that you'd said about yourself, that, making a conscious choice to surround yourself with people who are like-minded, or people who are showing up in the way that you'd want to be showing up, and to surround yourself with people that are in that place. Because I have coaches and I have a community, and, I have people that are doing this incredible work, and, they will give me a phone call and give me a little bit of a love slap, is what I call it, and say, oi, what are you doing? And then there's the ownership, but then there's also the accountability, right? Coming from other people. And it's a big part of the work that I do, because I can't necessarily see all my shit, right? I can't see all the stuff that I play out. I can't see the patterns that I'm in, but other people can. You know, when you see one of your friends and they're like, oh my God, there they go doing that thing again, you know, and or they're you know, they're whatever the pattern is. And we can gift that to each other when we're in this place of ownership and personal responsibility, right? Service, being in service to ourselves and other people. So surrounding people, you know, surrounding yourself with people who want to grow, who want to do this, you know, this incredible work, who want to wake up, yeah, and be in the world in a different way. So yeah, that's part of what I would say in response to that question. Maybe you want to ask me something else around that, or
Yeah, like I do. I do think about the amount of, well, we make it, like we get in our own ways, right? Like we make it difficult for ourselves. And my friend Andre talks about that a lot. He's a facilitator for depression and anxiety. But I do like to, I still take stock of how difficult it can be, right? Like to have someone who's experienced a lot of traumatic experiences through their lives, and they haven't had nurturing and comfortability and just a sense of grounding, a foundation. And obviously that brings cracks in the egoic structure. So they can almost be put into a point, whether they have like PTSD or complex PTSD, where they don't even know who they are, right? So to come back from a space like that, it takes a lot of work. And there's obviously spaces that are more horrific, but the beautiful thing is people can still make it through. And I love the fact that you did touch on like the people, right? Like we've spoken about who we have around us and the energy they provide us and we provide them. I love being around people who offer me an empty space, and I love offering people an empty space. And I think this is like a perception, and it's like, what is selfish? Is it like, I'll give you an example, right? So for me personally, I think that if someone doesn't want to do something, if they genuinely don't want to do something, we shouldn't make them do it for us, right? Like you could be in a relationship or a partnership, and you might say, come to this dinner, and if you don't want to do it for me, but I would come at that and say, well, if they don't want to do it, we should respect that, and they don't want to do it. So from my perspective, that is, it's selfish when someone else wants you to do something that you don't want to do. But then from another person's perspective, like a friend of mine thinks the complete opposite. So what are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Yeah, I get you. And it's a really interesting thing, because what was coming up for me while you were talking was parenting, right? It's like, sometimes with my kids, they don't want to do what we're doing, right? They don't want to do it. And there's I guess the two things that are coming up to for me is rescuing and enabling, right? Rescuing people is one thing, but enabling people to stay in behavior if it's not great. I mean, I kind of know where you're going. It's like being able to honor myself and being able to honor, you know, my own boundaries, and then, you know, setting up spaces and connection with others where they're able to honor themselves. And for anyone who hasn't been able to do that, and I know that I wasn't able to honor my boundaries for many, many, many years, and wasn't able to honor even saying no to someone, and empowering people to do that, right, is a huge part. And then to be able to shift into another space where you know, I know for me with my kids, a lot of the time they might not want to do something, but then once they've done it, they're really glad that they did it, right? They're really glad that they did it. And there's this space in between that I'm feeling that you're getting to, that and touching on. If you've never been given that space with somebody that's honored what you wanted to do. Yeah. And correct me if I'm not getting what you're saying. But allowing them to have that, allowing them to be clear on what they want. And then, having the space that comes after that, which is the empowerment, right? The empowerment that can come in that space. Because I know for me that I've kept myself safe a lot, kept myself disconnected a lot, and not wanted to sort of venture out. And the parenting piece that came up, and it does come up a lot for me because obviously a lot of the work that I do is with parents. But I had a friend who, her young daughter, I think she was just coming into her teenage years, and she never wanted to go anywhere. Never wanted to go anywhere, didn't want to relate to anybody, didn't want to interact with anybody. So she just left her at home. Every time she went to go and do something, went to go out, she just left her at home. And she thought that she was loving her daughter by doing that, right? Those were that's what she wanted. Those were the needs that she had expressed. But is that empowering her, right? To be able to lift out of that space and actually be able to face the world. And I think this is where this is a really beautiful place to come to in the conversation, because when I work with people and that reference point that we were talking about, I want to be able to invite them into their own empowerment where they can be in any circumstances. It doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. They can be in lockdown. They can be in, in chaos, and they are still they're still okay. They're still grounded. They're still solid, right? That their sense of freedom and solidness in themselves doesn't come from outside of themselves. It comes from within them. And how do we gift that to our children, or how do we gift that to a friend who might not be in that place yet? Where we can invite them into empowerment rather than just allowing them to keep themselves safe and contained and, limited all the time. And there's a compassionate piece in there where, don't want to push somebody so hard and also not enable them to just stay there. Yeah. Because I know that for this mum, and her daughter ended up going and living with the father in the end, which was an interesting thing, because she thought that she was loving her daughter by giving her what she wanted, right? But she wasn't actually empowering her to be able to be in these social situations, or any other circumstances that, let's face it, are part of the world that we live in. Yeah. So there's a dance there of honoring and empowering, and not just enabling people to stay, in their limitations. Let's just call it that. Yeah. Yeah.
You spoke about not being able to say no, and I have actually had friends recently, or a friend recently, who is just being bullied in the workplace by her manager. And, we've had a discussion pertaining boundaries and assertiveness and being okay with saying no, not trying to be a people pleaser. But obviously, that's as far as my advice and insight goes. Being in the space that you hold, how would you go about allowing someone to step into their power and learning to say no and respecting themselves and holding these boundaries?
So what would I and gift them, or how would I sort of empower them to hold their boundaries? Is that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you think they should do? Should they speak with someone? Should they implement some type of practice? Should they rehearse what they're going to say? Where do you start with someone who doesn't really know how to implement boundaries or what they are?
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I would, I mean, one of the most incredible places that I always start is Google, right? Google.
Yeah.
And you know,
Google.
it may be sort of a bit of a giggle, but you know, my oldest boy, who's 13, he was having a particularly low, you know, few days, and he was very, very upset. And I said to him, look, dude, you know, why don't you go and have a little look, a little investigation, a little exploration on Google, and just find out what the symptoms of depression are, you know, and just so you know what it is. And so he went on a little journey with that. And then I sort of gave him another idea. I said, and why don't you get onto YouTube and type in inspiring TED Talks for teenagers, you know? So it was, and with what we've been talking about here, it's both sides, right? It's both sides. It's not just telling him to override what he's feeling and just listen to inspirational talks. It's like, okay, you've got some stuff going on at the moment. Why don't you learn about it? You know, not just kind of put your blinkers on and pretend it's not happening or avoid it, which is so much of what happens in our society, right? We don't talk about mental health. You know, I mean, no one's talking about the aftermath or the events of what's happened over the last couple of years, right? In terms of mental health, I mean,
no, not at all.
Huge aftermath, huge impacts that are going to be ongoing. No one's talking about it. So, you know, my boys' school, you know, they just ban the songs that have any reference to sex in it, right? Oh no, we can't have that song doing our jump jam exercise in the morning. It's like, so we just avoid these topics. So bringing it out into the light. Yeah. If you've got a friend, it's like, if boundaries is something that you really struggle with, saying no to someone, you know, we live in a culture of people pleasers, right? That
Yeah.
don't rock the boat, you
Right.
know, got to keep everything smooth, got to say what people want to hear. And, you know, the first thing that I would do if I was really at the beginning of that journey is to get onto Google, get onto YouTube and, you know, type in boundaries and learn about it. Because what it is that it's taking the stigma out of it, right? It's shining the light on it. I mean, I had a huge problem with boundaries for most of my life. And I went and started doing workshops on it. You know, other people were holding workshops on boundaries and learning about consent. And I was like, right, I'm all over that because I want to learn this stuff. You know, I don't want to be in this disempowered place anymore. And, you know, part of that process, if you're right at the beginning, is talking to people about it. You know, where if you can open conversations with friends, wow, you know, something I've noticed in you. You know, you could have said no to that person. Actually, I had an experience the other day. And a friend of mine sent me a message and she said, oh, you know, this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. And I said, you know, you could say no, babe. Just no, you could say no. And she said, wow, yeah, this is something that I'm working on at the moment, you know? So yeah, it's being able to spot that in the people that we're around and also give them some lifelines, for want of a better word, some direction, you know, hey, you know, you could have a look at this, because as soon as someone gets on Google and sees like 20 videos on boundaries, it's like, oh my God, I'm not alone. You know, I'm not the only one that's having trouble with this. And, you know, I remember seeing a brilliant video on bullying, and it was for kids, you know, it was done for kids watching it. And it was just like how to take the power out of a bully, you know, like the bully was coming up and saying, oh, you're ugly or something. Or you don't know how to do this. And, you know, the way that this video was going was, yeah, just agree with them. Just agree with them. I was like, you watch how the fire is taken out of that bully, right? Because there's, oh my God, there's no gas, there's no reaction, there's nothing here. And that was from a YouTube video, you know, inspiring.
Yeah, actually I did, because for me personally, I'm happy to be an empty space for people. But when it just continues to recycle, when the same thing continues to recycle, sure, we can, yeah. Yeah, so I was just saying how I'm happy to be I'm happy to be an empty space for someone, but when when it's like a cycle, when let's say the challenge or the issue just continues to recycle itself, that's when I have to bring in boundaries, because one, I think offering a solution is a good thing. So I did offer the solutions. I did offer Google, and I also said, either speaking with someone outside, like outsourcing a counselor or a therapist, or someone who can understand their situation. And then also what you done was actually do a boundaries course and learn assertiveness, learning how to say no. And then I said, if you do one of those things, then I am happy to re-engage in a conversation. And that was because it was affecting me emotionally, because this just the continuation of allowing challenges and issues to come in your life without actually doing anything about it, but continuing to complain about it. I don't do well with that, especially because I've done that in the past and I don't want to do that anymore. So I don't normalize that behavior. What are your thoughts on that?
Yep, that's really good stuff, and I absolutely agree. There's boundaries coming both ways, right? With someone that's having a challenge, and with somebody that's holding space for them, right? Holding that space. And a couple of things came up. It's like, because the counselor idea is great, the therapist, the somebody else that can hold that space for them. Another thing that I tend to use with people in my friendships, obviously, I have coaching relationships, so that's what they are. They're coaching relationships. And they're empowered coaching relationships, right? But with the friendships that I have, I'll share with them, what is it that you need from me? Do you need me just to listen, just to create that empty space, was the way that you were languaging it. Do you need me just to listen, or do you want me to listen and then offer you solutions, right? Feedback. Or do you want me to listen and offer you feedback, while you're along the way? It's like a dialogue, backwards and forwards. And it means that it's really, really clear what the expectation is from the other person, the one that's got the challenge, and what the capacity is for the person that is wanting to support them in some way. So that was one of the things that came up, as you were talking, because, we don't want to get into places where we are just becoming like, we actually getting battered by other people, our friendships, or people that are in our lives that are kind of just venting. And when you said to me the cycle, you're just kind of venting what's going on for them, but there's no responsibility, or there's no ownership being taken for that person to do something about it. And I know that when I put in these boundaries with people that that are sharing with me, or that piece around ownership often will lead them into a different direction, right? As soon as somebody takes ownership, they're going to go to Google, or they're going to try and find somebody outside that is, that could give them a real support and empowerment around whatever they're navigating. But until that ownership is there, until, if they're still in that place where they're expecting everything around them to change, and interestingly, you brought up with this, this bully, because if we're in a place where others' behavior needs to change, and we're not in a place where we're going to be the change, right? We're going to be the one that's changing. Then we're always going to be in that disempowered place. So that was something that came up, and a incident or something that's been going on with one of my kids. He catches the bus with one of the other kids at school, and they're always at the bus stop, and the behavior of this kid has been really quite rubbish over the last while, throwing rocks and just doing stuff that bullying kind of stuff. And so I've been working with my boy around his empowerment, because his empowerment is not expecting that kid to change, because that kid may never change. He may never change his behavior. He may be like that forever. And I was like, okay, well, what could you do that you've said your piece? If it's not being listened to, which is often the way in situations that arise, what can you do to empower yourself? And what he ended up getting to was he's going to walk to the next bus stop. Just get on the bus there. Like once they're on the bus, the kid isn't doing the things that he does at the bus stop. But it's like being able to remove himself from the situation is the empowerment, because he's not expecting that other person to change anymore. So that was something that came up while you were talking, because it's a lot of what we are, the culture that we're in. We just expect other people's behavior to change, but we're not actually looking at what we can do for ourselves, and how we can find that empowerment for ourselves. Because, and in terms of boundaries, we need to be the one that instills those boundaries. No one else is going to do it for us. We need to be the ones that do it. And there are, there's a lot of support out there that you can find, as long as you're in that place of taking ownership of it, right? As long as you're in that place of, well, this is my responsibility. If I don't want to continually have my boundaries being crossed, or, then I need to do what I can around that. I need to go and empower myself in that way. So, yeah. And there's a lot of stuff out there these days, which I had no idea about. And I think that's the piece that we're talking about, Jake, is that as soon as you go onto Google and realize, wow, there's actually a lot of stuff here, which I could be doing, and I could have access to a lot of people that can support. And for you in the situation with your friend, gifting them that opportunity, why don't you go and speak to a counselor, man? It's been so good from what I hear from other people, or your own experience, or whatever it is. To have that neutral person that isn't part of a friendship is gold. Yeah.
Thank you for that insight. And like being in a position that you are, because, maybe one day I may be doing something similar to you, right? Like, let's say, for example, like you've got butter, but there's like different kinds of butter, like different brands of products. Mm-hmm. So I do feel as though I will be working with people in a space of empowerment and healing and opening. How do you keep boundary? I don't know if you work with male and female, or you're attracted to personally, or what they are, but how do you keep boundaries in place? Like, how do you keep them safe, and how do you keep yourself safe? And what are your like overall thoughts on that relationship between like a mentor and a student?
Yeah. And it's a dialogue, right? It's a constant dialogue. And there's so many areas that come up here, because a lot of the people that I work with, I work with a lot of friends, right? And a lot of people will say, "Oh, I don't work with friends. Don't that's don't go there," right? And it's like, these are the things that I really want to break down. And it's like, how clear in the communication can we get, and how open can this space become, so that we can work together? So that whenever something is arising, it's spoken about, right, in the moment, or as close to the moment as possible, but it never goes left unsaid. So it's a constant dialogue, which doesn't necessarily keep to sort of old ways of doing things, which, really compartmentalize, oh, I can't work with that person, or, I wouldn't work with that person because they find me attractive, or I wouldn't work with that person because I find them attractive, or whatever it is. It's like being really clear from the outset about what's okay and what's not okay. Like working with a team, I have an assistant that works with me. I have someone that does marketing, and being really clear, when are you available? right? Because we're on call 24/7 these days with Messenger and all the rest of it. And,
Yeah.
what hours are you available? When is it okay to contact you? And I've just recently put boundaries in around, I don't work after, 3:30, 4 o'clock, right? When my kids come home from school, I don't work after that. That's a boundary. And I don't work in the weekend, so things like that have been coming into my world, because I was working all sorts of hours and, all crazy talk hours, and just being very, very clear on what's going on and when something isn't okay. Because I know for me in my past, I would just let those things go and I wouldn't say anything, and it would just, eat away at me inside. I should have said something about that, and that wasn't okay for me, and I didn't say it. And, because there'd be so much fear around how it would be received. And, this whole thing around boundaries and not being able to say what's okay for me and what's not, and working in this space. And it's a practice. And this is one of the biggest pieces of gold that I've received in the work that I've been doing over the last few years. It's a practice. We're human. Yeah. We're not perfect robots, right? Even though my focus is predominantly in this creator space, which is what I call it, yeah, man, sometimes I get tripped up by my own shit, just like everybody else, right? Because I'm human. And having that human aspect and being okay with that human aspect when I don't, when I get something wrong, when I screw something up, being the first to own it. Hey, you know what? I wish I'd done that a different way. And really placing that in the center of the connection with another person. So communication is everything, and being really, really clear of the complete container of what is happening between a client and a coach, a client and a practitioner, because it can go into tricky ground. However, the space that I stand in, or the space that I operate in, is around empowerment. How can I empower other people the way that I've found empowerment? Not just expecting one person to be the one that's powerful, or one person to keep me safe, one person I work with people from the very start to see where they're not in their power, to see where they're giving away their power from the very beginning, because that's the kind of coaching relationships that I want to be involved in from the very beginning. So it's a dialogue. It's a constant dialogue of setting up the space that I work with people within. Yeah, it's a constant dialogue, and open communication is vital to it. And so much of the way that we're conditioned again is we don't say the thing. The thing that's sitting there, like the elephant in the room is another way that people put it. If there's something sitting there, it gets spoken about, and those are the types of conversations that I bring. Because another way of looking at that is if I'm always expecting that kind of level of communication to come back to me, then I have to be the one to bring it. I have to be the one to bring it. And it's definitely the way that I set up all of the relationships that I work with. I bring that, because then it comes back, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you normalize communication, because no matter how someone's feeling or thoughts are arising, there can be a lot of guilt there as well. Like, you could feel bad, maybe. And sometimes I almost feel like you don't really have control of, you do to a certain degree have control of what comes through, like through your information field. But sometimes some things just come up, something's just arise, or you feel naturally inclined towards this person. And I think for you to hold a space where conversation and honesty is normalized, that is something, I can take away from that insight. I just have 3 more questions. This question is kind of, it's quite personal, but I'm interested to know, and you could obviously pass on the question, but and maybe you don't want a partner or a relationship. You know, you're probably in a space where you don't really need anything, but being who you are and going through the experiences you have, and you know, being able to just transform yourself, do you find it difficult to find a suitable companion for you?
It's a great question. It's a really great question. And gosh, a few years ago, I probably would have avoided that question because I was avoiding the topic. And there's a very good reason for it, because those 3 relationships that I was talking about that were essentially with the same man, just a different version, you know, I now have so much awareness around the codependency of those relationships and how, you know, there was so much need there in those relationships. And it just made me terrified of going back into a relationship, because I didn't want to repeat that. You know, I didn't want the 4th version of that same relationship to play out. So I just avoided it. And I was like, I know, I'll focus on my work, right? You know, I'll focus on my kids. And that's what happened. And now, you know, I'm in a place where I'm opening up to that again, through very, very different lenses of what it is that I'm looking for in a relationship. Because before, the way that I was in relationship was all about security. You know, it was all about, I just need someone that's going to, you know, that's going to provide for me and that's going to make me feel safe. And, you know, I'm a woman, and all of that stuff was sitting there, having come from a single parent family, you know, and that being my road to security, which is, you know, it's the conditioning around a lot of women, you know, that's the only way that we find security. We have to marry some dude, right? And now it's like, okay, well, now I've created these businesses for myself. What is it that I'm actually desiring to experience with another person, when it's not that? And it's fascinating to watch it all, because, you know, it's like the Disney, what is it? The Disney effect, or you know, that I could call it, or he's called it the treadmill story. This is the Disney story. Oh, where's my white knight in shining armor that's going to come up and rescue me from my life, right? It's like, you know, when that's not playing out, what else is there? You know, I have an incredibly supportive and loving co-parenting relationship with my boy's father. And it wasn't always like that, right? Because I left him, and it wasn't pretty, you know, when it all was happening. And the fact that we've been able to detangle from one another and find ourselves as individuals and rock our, you know, he's got a solo art exhibition that's happening next week in Auckland, which is amazing. You know, I've got these businesses which are thriving, that, you know, the coaching work that I do, the trainings that I do, which are, you know, opening people's lives to a completely different way of being in the world. Yet we can support each other now in a very, very different way. And communication is such a huge part of that. So, you know, now it's not about all of that other stuff, right? It's about fun. It's about playfulness. It's about joy. And I remember my mum, who remarried about 13, 14 years ago. And she rang me. I was in London at the time, and she said, well, I've met this man, and, you know, and I don't know, and I'm not sure, and, you know, he's a little old man. And I said, Mum, does he make you laugh? Do you laugh when you're around him? And she said, yes. And she married him. And he's the most amazing husband that she's ever had. And she's had 3. So, you know, it's
third time lucky.
Yeah, third time lucky, you know. And so it's now it's like, well, what is this relationship that I want to be in? What does it look like when it's not all of that other stuff, you know, that now I've been able to see, and seeing the way that I played, you know, all of my stuff. I mean, I wrote my husband a 10-page letter owning all my shit in the relationship, because I finally took the blame off him and started looking at myself, and then I could take ownership for all of that stuff, right? So yeah, it's a really different way of being in relationship, and it's something that I'm only just opening up to. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, that'll be great. All the best to you as well with
Thank
that
you.
endeavor. And yeah, I was actually going to ask you about a reconciliation, because for me, um, so I was in two relationships, and they were obviously like with the same person, but like a different flavor. And with the first one, I was able to reconcile with them, and we have like a mutual respect, and we conversate and talk every now and then, and I was just able to um, offload like my condolences, and just taking ownership for the things that I had done in the relationship, and it was reciprocated. So there was like a great healing done in that. But with the second one, there was just like no communication at all. So I actually I felt like I never got the chance to have proper closure to that. So I do hope one day that opportunity does present itself for me, and I think for her. And this was like a couple of years ago. But of course, that is a good space to be in when you can just find yourself as an individual in a partnership, relationship, companionship, as two individuals, like just sharing in this moment together. And that's beautiful. And thank you for like just being vulnerable and open, and sharing that with me and us.
Yeah. I mean, it just what you said just then, the closure piece. It's like I wrote my boy's dad a 10-page letter. Yeah, I didn't have any expectation that he would read it. I certainly didn't have any expectation that he would respond to it, and he didn't. Like, he didn't write me a letter back. But that was my part of closure, right? Of taking ownership of all my stuff in the relationship, and that's what got me that. But there was no expectation on him, and it's such a beautiful thing. It's a really powerful place to be in, that we can actually create that for ourselves without having anything, being determined by the other person. Yeah, really powerful.
Yeah, and that's something I do wish for. I mean, all beings. I
Yeah.
wish happiness for them all, like self-discovery, self-acceptance as well, like self-confidence. I hope that all beings find themselves, and find themselves in themselves, and not through the conditions of those around them. So
Yeah.
with the podcast, I like to ask two final questions, and it's about self-celebration. I can celebrate with you quietly, and those who are listening, I think gives them an opportunity to reflect on their lives, and the questions I ask, and see what comes up for them. So what are you most proud of doing in this life?
Ah. The first thing came up was my kids. The way that I've been able to move into a completely different place in my parenting, the way that I am as a parent, and coming from where I did, from where I was, where I had my own parent mentor. My oldest boy was 7, and we were in a really tricky place. That's when my marriage was splitting up, and I was one of those shouty mums that would lose their shit at their kids, and scream and yell, and I still say to my older boy, do you remember when mum was like that, right? And he goes, yeah, I remember, yep. And the place that I'm in now, where I can focus on the connection with my child rather than whatever's been broken or whatever's been said, or the circumstances that are happening in the moment, right? I have this time, which I didn't have before, where I can choose whether I want to, whether I react and lose it, or whether I respond in a different way. And there's been a lot of things and a lot of tools, that have got me to that place. But man, I'm a completely different parent in their eyes. And I know that the wisdom that's coming through them now at 10 and 13 is profound, and I didn't have that up until a number of years ago. And
Yeah.
they've already got that, and they're, just coming into their teenage years, my older boys. So I'm celebrating that, I'm really celebrating that. And every single parent that I work with is gifting that to their children as well. And, when I was working with somebody, and I can't remember, I think I might have mentioned this in our talk, the fastest way to organically generate change in the world is to work with parents, because then we're not just putting band-aids on and fixing the grown-ups, right? The adults. We're actually starting so much earlier. And if my dream came true, it would be to actually work with people before they become parents, right? To become aware of the belief systems and everything that's tripping them up and getting in their way. So yeah, that's what I'm celebrating. Yeah, the fact that I've got myself into a place where I can parent from the present moment rather than the past, right? Everything that was behind me. And what I'm gifting my kids and every other parent that I'm working with. So that's what I'm celebrating.
Wow, that's incredible.
Mm.
That is absolutely incredible. Did you have fear that your oldest boy would have some type of resentment or trauma, or he would express the way that you potentially may have parented him at the beginning? Did you have some fears or like
Yeah.
worries that he would grow up to uh, have some type of blockage towards you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have done in the past. Now, and when I when I work with parents, I gift them this piece because it absolutely takes them off the hook. Because they're all terrified of being bad parents, right? And I'm gonna fuck up my kids. So, and it's like, look, I'm gonna gift you this. You're gonna fuck up your kids.
Yeah.
It's a given. It's gonna
Mm,
happen, right? There's no way that you can parent them in the way that they want to be parented, because you're
mm.
different people, completely different people. And the gift that I now give my son, because when I think about it, I was depressed for 2 years of his life, that nurturing phase when he is seeking nurturing from his mother. Right? That is the nurturing phase. And I could guilt myself up for that for the rest of my life, or I can focus on the connection that I have with him now, and have had with him since I started really bringing the responsibility back to myself, right? So yes, there has definitely been fear. And now that, like I bring this lightness, I bring this communication into our relationship every single day. Like one of the first things that I said to my boys when I brought transparent, vulnerable communication in between us was, before you were born, I'd never been a parent. I'd never been a parent. This is the first time you've ever been a kid. It's the first time I've been a parent. So how about we try and work it out together somehow, and it was just like the relief for both of us to, oh my God,
Yeah.
we're human. We're going to screw
Mm.
this up. We're going to get it wrong. We're going to, and the fact that I've already said to shared with my boys, you're going to get a whole lot of stuff from me that isn't you, and I'm going to sort of be around to help you see what's mine and what's yours, and but the lightness of which we can do that, because I'm not pretending or not trying to get away from the fact that I'm going to damage my kids in some way. We're all going to be wounded as children, and our children are all going to be wounded as well. And and I still remember when my parent mentor said this to me. He said, we're all going to fuck up our kids. We just need to do it with as much grace and humor as we can, right? And that just takes everything away. When we know that it's part of being human, it's part of the cycles of the past. So my kids are aware of it, and I'm like, that enables me to bring lightness, bring joy, bring playfulness, and it enables me to focus on the connection with him now, rather than being worried about all of that stuff that I can't change. I can't change any of that stuff. What I can do is focus on where we're at now. So yeah, it's good stuff. Good question.
Yeah, that reminded me of when you learn a new skill for the first time, and just how uncoordinated and terrible you are.
Yeah.
But then having, obviously, putting the time and the effort and the practice in, understanding it more, you get better at it. So thank you for that wonderful analogy, because I've actually never seen it like the way that you expressed seeing it. And I feel like parents who listen to this will could potentially take great teachings from that specific dialogue we just had there. So the final question is, because I've been holding you for such a long time, what is your hope for the world and future generations?
My hope for the world and future generations. Is that they can find awareness, and it's part of what's been the biggest gift for me is learning about my humanness and learning to accept my humanness. And that is the gateway to what I call my greatness, right? My genius, the magic. This is the magic coming in, and I would never have thought that would be the way. There's a Sufi quote that my coach shared with me, and the quote is, the dysfunctional personality is the gateway to the soul. It's like, you can't make gold out of gold. You make it out of lead, right? We need our struggles. We need our challenges. We need the shitty bits that we've been through, because when we can alchemize that, when we can change our relationship to it, we find the gold, right? We find what we're here to do. We find our purpose. And my hope for, if I was going to say what my hope for humanity is that humans find that, right? They discover that. They go through that part of the human journey, to realize that, we've been born into this perception of ourselves and the world, and it's not reality. It's not true. It's not real. And when we can find our way to a different, gold, through our humanness, not trying to fix it, not trying to hide from it, not trying to pretend it doesn't exist, but actually embracing it, embracing where we've come from, embracing the places that we've navigated through, and being able to see that for the gold that it is. Because it is gold. Every single challenge that I've navigated through my life has brought me to this place, to where I am now, and to be able to empower others, right? And I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change one moment of it. And it's not that it wasn't hard, because there were a lot of times that were really hard. And sitting here with you like this, a number of years ago, when it was still very, very fresh and very new, I wouldn't have been able to have this conversation without being in tears, because it was still very much there. And for me to be able to move through that in an empowered way, to get to a place where now I can empower others, it's huge, right? It's huge to be able to change our relationship and the way that we see our struggles, because every single person on the planet has their own version of stuff that they've navigated through, right? Of adversity, of challenge, everyone, and it's what we do with that challenge that matters. It's not, the level of it, or the severity of it, or the whatever of it, right? It's what we do with it from now that matters. So that would be my hope, that every human on the planet can take their humanness and find their greatness through it. Yeah.
Well, peer empowerment mentor, Wolfpack, creator consciousness workshops, Jacqlin Richards, you are amazing. You are incredible. And I say that genuinely and authentically. I think we need more people like you in this world. And I've definitely taken a lot from this conversation. So thank you for your time, your vulnerability, and your willingness to show up today.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.